Hey, my name is Cal Merritt. I'm 31 years old, and I live in a small rental house on the east side of Harlan, Kentucky, about 12 minutes from the auto shop where I've worked since I was 19. The shop is called Merritt and Sons, which sounds grander than it is. It was my dad's and his dad's before that, and when my dad's back went, about 4 years ago, it became mostly just mine. We kept the name because changing the sign costs money and because, honestly, nobody in Harlan cared what was printed on it. They cared whether you fixed what was broken and charged them fair. That's what we've always done. I work Tuesday through Saturday, 6 in the morning until 5 or 6 at night, depending on the season and what came in. My hands are usually dirty by 7 a.m. I know what a transmission sounds like when it's 2 weeks from giving out. I know the difference between a rattle that'll kill you in traffic and a rattle that's just going to annoy you for the next decade. I know how to read a vehicle, not just run diagnostics on it, but actually listen to it, feel it, understand what it's telling you through the wheel and the seat, and the particular way it hesitates on a hill. My dad used to say that most of what's wrong with a car is that nobody listened to it soon enough. I think about that more than I used to. My days are simple. I'm at the shop before the coffee's finished brewing. I work through. I eat lunch in the back bay, usually something I packed, sometimes something from the diner on the corner if it was a good morning. I close up, drive home, shower, eat whatever I've got in the refrigerator, watch some baseball, or fall asleep trying. I'm in bed by 10. I wake up at 5:15 and do it again. It's a quiet life. I made my peace with that a long time ago. I'm not complaining. There are worse things than a routine that holds. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a certain weight to a house, where the only sounds in the evening are whatever you put on the television. There had been someone a few years back. Her name was April, and we'd been together for almost 3 years. And then she got a job offer in Charlotte, and she went. And I understood it, even though it took me a long time to say so. We tried the distance for a few months. We stopped trying. There was no drama in the ending. That was almost the hardest part of it. That something that had meant that much could end so quietly. Like turning off a lamp. After April, I settled back into the routine and told myself the routine was enough. My best friend in the world has been Nora Callahan since we were 14 years old. I say that plainly because that's what it is. She's been my best friend for 17 years. We grew up 3 streets apart, went to the same school, worked our first summer jobs at the same hardware store, spent half our 20s going to each other's houses when things went sideways. She's the person I called when my dad's back surgery didn't go as well as it should have. She's the person who drove an hour and a half in a snowstorm to sit with me in a waiting room without me having to ask. She is, in the plainest possible terms, the most constant and reliable person in my life. She's also 30 years old and works as a landscape architect for a firm in town. And she has her mother's dark hair and her father's stubbornness and a laugh that has gotten me out of more bad moods than I can count. And I had spent approximately 17 years telling myself, very carefully, that what I felt for her was exactly what I said it was. Friendship. Just friendship. This is the story of one night in October that dismantled that very carefully maintained position. It started with a text at 11:14 on a Friday night. I was already in bed, not quite asleep, listening to rain hit the gutters. "Hey, can you come get me? I'm at the tap room and I maybe overdid it a little." I looked at the message for a second. Nora doesn't drink much, a beer or 2 at a cookout, a glass of wine at her mother's dinner table. Whatever overdid it a little meant from her, it meant something had gone wrong. I typed back, "On my way. You okay?" She sent back a thumbs up emoji. Then, 30 seconds later. Not great, actually. I was already pulling on my boots. The tap room is downtown, about 8 minutes from my house. I drove through rain that had turned steady and cold, the kind that gets into your collar before you've taken 3 steps. I thought about what might have happened. Nora had been dating someone for a few months, a guy named Fletcher who worked in commercial real estate and wore the kind of shoes that meant he'd never fixed anything in his life. I hadn't said that to her. I'd said he seemed fine. She'd looked at me in a way that suggested she knew what fine meant when I said it. I parked in front of the bar and went in. She was at the far end of the bar with a glass of water in front of her and her coat on her lap, and her hair coming loose from whatever she'd put it up in. Her mascara had done what mascara does when a night goes a certain direction. She saw me come in and tried to smile, and the smile was the kind that's really more of an apology. I sat down next to her. I didn't say anything right away. I just flagged down the bartender, got a water for myself, and sat there. Fletcher broke up with me, she said after a moment. Here. He texted me, while I was already here waiting for him. She laughed, and it was a short, dry sound with no happiness in it at all. Classy. I looked at the water glass in front of her. How many of those did you have before this water? I switched to water after 3. I was very responsible. Good. I might be a little drunk still, though. That's okay. She looked over at me. Her eyes were red at the edges. Not crying now. Just the residue of it. You came fast. You said not great. She looked back at her water. Yeah, we stayed there another 20 minutes while the rain kept up, and she drank the water and told me the parts of the story she wanted to tell. Fletcher had seemed good on paper. He'd been attentive at first, then gradually less so. Then he'd made plans for tonight and canceled them by text while she was already at the bar they were supposed to meet at. And when she'd written back, he'd said he thought they wanted different things. She'd ordered a second drink at that point, and then a third. And then she'd called her friend Becca, who wasn't answering, and then she'd texted me. I listened to all of it. I know how to listen. I've learned that what most people need in those moments isn't advice. It's someone sitting still while they say the thing out loud. When she was done, I paid the water tab and helped her into her coat. She protested that she could put on her own coat, which was true, and did it herself, slightly crooked. I didn't fix it. I'm going to take you home, I said. I can call I know you can. I'm here. Let's go. She looked at me for a second in the particular way she has when she's deciding whether to argue and then deciding not to. Then she nodded and picked up her bag. The drive to her house takes about 12 minutes. She lives in the same house she grew up in, with her mother, Carol, who moved back in 3 years ago after her father passed. Nora has talked about getting her own place, something with a little yard she could actually use. But the timing never quite worked out. I think she stays partly for practical reasons, and partly because neither of them wants to say out loud that the house is too quiet with just one person in it. In the car, Nora leaned her head back against the seat and watched the rain on the passenger window. You know what's the worst part? She said. What? I wasn't even that upset about Fletcher specifically. She paused. I was upset about the thing, you know, the pattern, that I keep trying and it keeps going like this. It doesn't always go like this. It feels like it always goes like this. She turned her head and looked at me. When did you stop trying? I kept my eyes on the road. What do you mean? I mean, you haven't dated anyone seriously since April. That was like 3 years ago, and you seem... She considered the word. Fine. You seem fine with it. I'm fine with it. How? I just am. She turned back to the window. I want to be fine with it too. I'm not. I want the thing, Cal. I want someone to come and get me in the rain without me having to explain why I need them to. Something tightened in my chest. I kept my hands where they were. Someone did that tonight, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said quietly, yeah. I pulled into her driveway at 12:40. The porch light was on, the way it always is when Carol knows one of them is coming home late. I parked and turned off the engine, and neither of us moved for a second. You gonna be okay? I said. I'm gonna be fine. She said it the same way I had, and it meant the same thing. That fine is what you say when the actual word is too large to fit in the car. She unbuckled her seatbelt. You want to come in? My mom will make you something. You know how she gets. Carol Callahan has been making people food as a form of language her entire adult life. Soup when you're sad, cornbread when you're cold, pie when she doesn't know what else to offer but needs to offer something. It's almost 1 a.m, I said. She'll be up. She always waits up. Nora pushed open the door. Come on, she worries about you. I came in. The kitchen light was on, and Carol was at the table with a cup of tea and a library book she'd clearly been pretending to read. She looked up when we came through the door, and her face did the specific thing it does when she's relieved but doesn't want to make a production of it. There she is, Carol said. She stood up and looked at Nora, the full-length assessment that mothers do, cataloging the situation in about 1 second. Sit down. I'll make eggs. Mom, it's 1 a.m. I know what time it is. She was already moving to the stove. She looked over her shoulder at me. Cal, thank you for going. Of course. Sit. Both of you. I sat at the kitchen table across from Nora. She had her coat off now and was pulling her hair the rest of the way down, fingers working through it with the automatic movements of someone who's done that same gesture 10,000 times. The kitchen smelled like the tea and something herby and like the particular warm smell that house has always had. I had eaten at that table more times than I could count. I had done homework at that table. I had sat at that table the night Nora's dad came home from his first round of treatment, and we were all pretending things were better than they were. I knew every scratch in that tabletop. Carol made eggs and toast. Nora ate half of hers. I ate mine because Carol makes good eggs and because I'd left the house in a hurry and hadn't eaten since 7. We talked about nothing much. Carol asked about my dad's back. I asked about the book she'd been reading. Nora said almost nothing and stared at her plate in the good-natured, exhausted way of someone who has spent their emotional reserves for the evening. Around 1:30, Nora said she was going to bed and kissed her mother on the top of the head and looked at me with that same apologetic half-smile from the bar. Thank you, she said. Really. Get some sleep. She went up the stairs. I heard her footsteps overhead, bathroom, then her room, then quiet. Carol refilled my tea without asking. She sat back down across from me. She had her hands around her own cup and she was looking at the table. And she had the expression she gets when she's deciding whether to say the thing she's been holding for a while. I know that expression. I've been watching it for 17 years. She okay? I said. She'll be all right. Carol looked up. Her voice had changed slightly, become quieter. She said it the way you say something you've been waiting a long time to say, not loudly, but with all your weight behind it. Cal, can I tell you something? Sure. She held my eyes. She's been in love with you for years. The kitchen was quiet. The rain had slowed to a tap against the window. The refrigerator made its small sound. I didn't say anything. Carol let the words sit there. She wasn't dramatic about it. She didn't lean in. She just set it down between us like a fact, the way you set a heavy tool down on a workbench when your arm's gotten tired of carrying it. I've watched her for a long time, Carol said. I've watched her date people who weren't right for her, and I've watched her try to talk herself into it, and I've watched the way she looks at you when you're not looking at her. And I'm 61 years old, and I'm too tired to watch it anymore without saying something to someone. She picked up her cup. I'm not asking you to do anything with that. I just thought somebody should say it out loud. She stood up, rinsed her cup in the sink, and looked back at me with something on her face that was halfway between apology and conviction. "Drive safe," she said. And she went upstairs. I sat at that kitchen table for a while after she left. I don't know how long. Long enough for the tea to go cold. Long enough for the rain to stop entirely. So that when I finally walked outside, it was quiet in a way that October nights only get after rain. And the air had that washed-out smell that makes everything seem newer than it actually is. I drove home. I did not fall asleep. Here is what I thought about on the drive home and then on the ceiling of my bedroom until 3 in the morning, which is longer than I'd like to admit. I thought about the way I'd felt when her text said not great, actually, and how I'd been out of bed before I'd finished reading it. I thought about April, and the way the end of that had felt, real, sad, something lost. And I thought about how I had not felt that particular kind of sad in 3 years. Not because nothing had mattered since then, but because the person I would have called to talk about it was Nora. And there is something in that specific fact that I had been very carefully not looking at for a very long time. I thought about the way she'd said someone did that tonight in the car, the quietness of it, the way she'd turned back to the window immediately afterward, like she needed to. I thought about how, when she came through the door at the bar with her coat sideways and her makeup ruined, and that apologetic smile, the first thing I had felt was not sympathy. It was relief. That she was all right. That I could see her with my own eyes and know she was all right. I had spent 17 years building a very tidy mental filing system. Everything I felt about Nora Callahan was filed under friendship, and that filing system had served me well. And Carol Callahan had just walked into the room and turned the entire cabinet over. The next morning, I went to the shop because it was Saturday, and that's what I do on Saturdays. I replaced a starter motor and diagnosed a coolant leak and talked to an older man named Gene about whether it was worth putting more money into his '07 Silverado. We decided together that it was, because he'd had that truck a long time, and sometimes you fix what you know rather than start over with something unfamiliar. I understood where he was coming from. I texted Nora at noon to check in. She said she was okay, that she'd slept, that her mother had made biscuits. I said that sounded like the right prescription. She sent back a small laughing emoji, and that was all. I thought about calling her. I thought about it the whole rest of the afternoon while I worked. There are things you can read in an engine if you listen carefully enough. A slight knock that means a rod bearing is going, a whine that means something in the power steering, a hesitation on an incline that tells you the fuel pump is on its way out. The vehicle tells you what it needs. You just have to have been doing this long enough to understand the language. I had been doing this long enough. I called her Sunday morning. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, how are you feeling? Better. Significantly better. I made a fool of myself. You really didn't. I texted you at 11 at night and cried a little in your car. Nora, I've seen you cry at a dog food commercial. There was a pause, and then she laughed, and it was the real one, not the dry, short one from the bar. That commercial is devastating, and you know it. A beat. Thank you for coming. I mean it. I know it was late. I want to come over, I said. Another pause, slightly longer. Yeah? Yeah. I want to. I need to say something to you, and I don't want to do it on the phone. Cal. Her voice had shifted. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I promise. I just want to come over. Okay, she said slowly. Okay, come over. I drove over at 11. It was a clear morning, sharp and cold the way late October gets after a rain. The leaves in Carol's yard were half down, the maple by the porch blazing orange in the way that always makes Harlan look like it's made for postcards. Nora was on the front porch with a mug when I pulled in. She was in a flannel shirt and her old jeans and her hair down, and she watched me come up the walk with the expression of someone who is trying to prepare themselves for a conversation they cannot yet categorize. I came up onto the porch and sat in the other chair. She handed me the coffee without being asked. I took it. We sat for a moment. The cold came off the yard in that clean way it does on October mornings. Somewhere down the street someone was raking. Your mom said something to me, I said. Friday night, after you went to bed. Nora went very still. She told me. I stopped. I put down the coffee because I needed my hands to do something, and what they did was clasp together in my lap. She told me you've been in love with me for years. The quiet that followed that sentence was the kind where you can hear individual birds. Nora didn't look at me. She looked at her coffee cup. A muscle moved in her jaw. I'm going to have a very serious conversation with my mother, she said. Don't. Cal, don't be angry at her. She was right to say it. I looked at the side of her face. Is it true? She didn't answer for a long time. Long enough that the man down the street finished raking one pile and moved on to the next one. I've worked very hard, she said finally, for a very long time to not make things weird between us. I know you have. Because you're the most important person in my life, and I wasn't going to... She stopped. I wasn't going to risk that. I've made my peace with it. Or I was making my peace with it. I know. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I've been doing the same thing in the other direction. Filing it under the wrong category and deciding that filing system was fine. She looked at me then, directly at me, for the first time since I'd sat down. What does that mean? She said. It means I drove home Friday night and couldn't sleep. And the reason I couldn't sleep is that I kept thinking about 17 years of evidence that I've been very deliberately not adding up. I looked back at her. My hands were tight together. I thought about the way you called me after your dad died, and I was the first call. I thought about the way I felt when I walked into that bar Friday night and saw you. I thought about 3 years ago when April left, and how the only person I wanted to talk to about it was you, and how I stopped. Just kept filing everything in the wrong place and telling myself the system worked. Nora set her coffee cup down on the porch rail. Her eyes were very bright. You're really slow, Cal. I looked at her. Yeah. I've been sitting with this for 4 years. Her voice was not angry. It was something closer to exhausted and relieved at the same time. The way a person sounds when they've been carrying something heavy for too long and someone finally says, I'll take that side. 4 years of dating people who weren't you and telling myself that was fine, that it was healthy, that I was moving on. I'm sorry. I'm not saying it to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because, she exhaled, because I want you to know it was real, that it's not just, I'm not just sad about Fletcher. I know it's real, I said. Nora, I know. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said quietly, What are you actually saying? And here is where I would normally hedge, where I would normally locate the safety of a softer version of the truth, some language that left us both room to maneuver. I've done that my whole life with things that mattered, approached them sideways, given myself an exit, kept the engine idling in case I needed to go. I had been listening to engines long enough to know when something was about to give out. I'm saying I should have added it up sooner, I said. I'm saying Friday night, when I saw you in that bar, the first thing I felt wasn't she needs help. It was, she's okay, she's there, I can see her. I looked at my hands and then back at her. I'm saying I have been in love with my best friend for longer than I know how to measure, and I have been very stupid about it. And I would like to stop being stupid about it if you'll let me. The leaves in the maple moved. Nora reached over and put her hand over mine. She didn't do anything else. She just put her hand over mine and kept it there, and looked out at the yard where the light was coming sideways through the tree, and she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "You really think you just figured this out Friday night?" I think I knew it a long time ago and just didn't look directly at it. Why not? Because it was you, I said. Because if I was wrong, I couldn't lose you, and the possibility of losing you was worse than... I stopped. Was worse than having this conversation 17 years ago. She was quiet for a moment. Her thumb moved slightly over my knuckles. I thought about telling you, she said. A few times, especially after April. I almost... She shook her head. You seemed like you needed time. I didn't want to make it about me. That's the most you thing you could have said. She laughed, small and real. Probably. I turned my hand over so my palm was up, and she didn't pull away. She looked down at our hands and then back up at me, and there was something in her face that had been there for 17 years that I was only now letting myself see clearly. Something careful and bright and real that I had been filing, incorrectly, for a very long time. I kissed her there on the porch in the October morning, with the smell of her mother's coffee still in the air and the maple throwing light through the railings and the sound of someone raking leaves 3 houses down. It was soft and unhurried. It felt like something clicking into place, not dramatic, not the way I might have imagined if I'd let myself imagine it. But the way a bolt feels when you finally got the thread right and it seats the way it was always supposed to. When we broke apart, she looked at me with something on her face that was partly amusement and partly the kind of feeling that doesn't quite have a word yet. 4 years, she said. I know. I should be furious with you. You probably should be. She leaned her head sideways onto my shoulder. I'll be furious later. The screen door opened behind us, and Carol came out with the coffee pot. She saw us, and her face did something complicated and warm that she immediately tried to contain. More coffee? She said, in a voice that was working very hard to be casual. Nora looked up at her. You're not even a little surprised. I'm just making the rounds, Carol said, with the particular dignity of a woman who has been right about something for a long time and is choosing not to say so. She refilled both cups. She went back inside. Through the screen door, I heard her put the coffee pot down, and then, just barely, I heard her make a sound that in another room, with a different face on it, would have been a sob. It was not a sob. It was the other thing. The sound you make when something you have been hoping for quietly, in private, for longer than you said you were hoping, finally happens. She was right in the end. About all of it. But I think she already knew that. 7 months after that morning on the porch, the maple was blooming. The shop had a new apprentice, a kid named Danny who reminded me of myself at 19, except slightly less stubborn, which I was willing to take. My dad had been out twice to walk around and touch tools and not do anything with them, which is his version of visiting, and I didn't push him on it. Nora had taken on a large residential project on the south end of town, a whole yard redesign, new beds, a kitchen garden, a path of flat stones she'd been drawing plans for in the evenings at my kitchen table while I watched baseball and pretended not to watch her. The project had run 2 weeks over and cost her 3 late nights, but it had come out right. And I had driven past the finished yard on a Friday afternoon and thought, that looks like her, exactly like her. The precision of it, the patience in it. Carol came to dinner every Sunday. She had started calling ahead to ask what she should bring, which Nora said was new, and which I took to mean she felt like she had something to contribute to something that was actually hers now. I liked Carol's pie. I told her so the first time, and she had pretended it was nothing and made it twice a month ever since. One evening in May, Nora and I were on the porch. My porch this time, the one that faces the old hickory tree on the side yard. And she had a sketch pad open but wasn't drawing, just holding the pencil and watching the light go. "What are you thinking about?" I said. "The job. Whether the stone path has enough grade." A pause. "You." "In what order?" She tilted her head. The job was first, but it was a brief first. The hickory was moving in the evening wind. There was a cardinal in it, doing the thing cardinals do where they sit at the highest point of whatever they're on. "Cal. Yeah, I'm happy." She said it the way you say something true and plain that you've been checking on regularly, making sure it's still there. I just wanted to say that. I know we don't always. She shrugged one shoulder. I wanted to say it. I looked at her in the evening light with her sketch pad and her pencil and her hair down. 17 years of knowing her assembled in the specific way that only happens when you finally stopped filing things in the wrong place and let yourself look at what's actually in front of you. "Me too," I said. That was all. The cardinal stayed in the hickory. The light went, the way it does. We stayed on the porch until it was dark. I used to think the life I had was the life I was going to have. The routine, the quiet house, the engine that hums along and doesn't give you any reason to listen closer. I thought I had made my peace with that. But there are nights when you drive through rain to get someone. Not because you've thought it through, not because you've weighed the options, but because her text said not great and you were already in your boots before you'd finished reading it. And in that single, unremarkable Friday night, everything you'd been carefully not adding up finally adds up to something so obvious, you can't believe it took you this long to do the math. Sometimes the thing you were looking for was the thing that had already been there, patient and steady and waiting. Every morning and every Sunday dinner and every late-night phone call for 17 years. You just had to stop being slow about it.